welcome back to the channel. Let's explore together. Today we're checking out apparently Ben Shapiro reviews The Batman. Spoiler alert according to the title of Ben Shapiro's video. Now this was sent in by you guys. If you want me to react to stuff that I might not react to on my own, check the links in the description for ways to do that. So what I find alarming to start with this is my man Ben is close to being ratioed. This is after YouTube's disabled dislikes unless you install a web browser to put them back in. And Ben Shapiro's not the kind of guy that gets a lot of, dislikes from his echo chamber fan base. I know that this review exists because of Ben Shapiro tweeting that he didn't like this movie. And it's just, you gotta understand your depth. The biggest problem I've always had with Ben Shapiro is he's very proficient in a few areas. Unfortunately, he tries to talk about everything. And so he ends up being wrong a lot more often than he's right, or he ends up having bad takes a lot more often than he has good takes, because he talks out of his depth all the time, because he thinks just because he's intelligent in certain areas means he's intelligent in all areas. In any case, media, historically, is one of the areas that Ben Shapiro very much struggles at. He tries to say rap isn't actual music, which is a corny take, and now he's going to go after the Batman. Why does Ben Shapiro not like the Batman? I don't know. Is it because he got triggered when Catwoman mentioned that there were privileged white men, which is completely in character for Catwoman to do? I don't know. I'm guessing it's something like that for Ben Shapiro to feel like he needs to do a review. Let's get into this and grill this man's lack of understanding of cinema, shall we?
Alrighty, folks. So last night I went and I saw The Batman. My review of that is coming up in just one moment. This video is sponsored by Ring.
And I ain't sticking through a Ring advertisement from Ben Shapiro. All right, spoilers ahead. Let's go.
Tonight I went and saw The Batman. Went and saw it with my wife. It is 1 million hours long, and
so it's hardly 3 hours. 1 million hours. It's barely into the 3 hour mark. I demand the next video be him saying why Lord of the Rings is bad because it's long.
It's one of those movies where I started off and I was like, okay, and then I got a little further in. I was like, all right, and then I got to the end. I was like, meh. And then the more I thought about it, the angrier.
Why are you squinting so much? And
so you're about to hear a lot of hot takes on The Batman because I hate this movie.
It's people always say hot take, usually when they're just trying to justify, hey, I'm wrong about this, but I want to still have an opinion. Not all opinions are equal. Anyone who tells you that all opinions are equal is stupid. All opinions are absolutely not on the same playing field. There are opinions of much more merit and validity than others because your opinion has to be based in some sort of logical point A to point B conclusion of why you stand by that opinion. And if your opinion fails to stand scrutiny and just becomes, well, it's because I feel that way, it's a far less valid opinion than someone's opinion who can stand a lot of scrutiny. This is going to be one of those, well, it's how I feel opinions, or just a very bad distortion of the film. This is going to take forever, this reaction is.
Okay, first of all, I'm just going to tell you right up front, spoilers. Spoilers aplenty here. So if you haven't seen the film yet and you want to see the film and you don't want to be spoiled, I'm warning you. You've been warned. All right, this is Detective Batman. So if the original Michael Keaton Batman was sort of crime-fighting Batman, and the Christopher Nolan Batman was city-saving Batman, this Batman is supposed to be Detective Batman. And this has a long history in the Batman comics. Some of the best Batman comics, particularly my favorite, The Long Halloween, is rooted in the idea of Batman not just as Caped Crusader, but as a great detective, smarter than everybody else, capable of picking up on clues, investigating and tracking down crimes. I'm going to start with what's right with the film because it's going to be real short. So
I'm gonna speed Shapiro up here. I know that's dangerous with how fast he talks, but I feel like we're safe to do that. Let's try 2 times speed. Because what he's saying right now is just background stuff I'm not interested in. I want to get to his hot takes.
What's right with the film is that it looks great. It is a film noirish take on Gotham City. It almost feels kind of like retro Taxi Driver Gotham City. So everything's very dirty. It's all taking place at night. It's shot in kind of grayscale at times. It's got a lot of warm oranges and reds, but against a very dark black. So it's a lot of muttered dialogue. It feels as though it's taking place in the same city as Joker is taking place. So if you saw
Correct. It is very well done cinematography-wise. It's probably the best shot Batman movie that's ever existed. It is artistically a masterpiece.
Joker, Todd Phillips' Joker, which looks like 1970s New York. It feels almost like the other half of that, but it seems more like the take on what future New York would look like if you were living in New York in 1970. That's sort of a good way of putting it. The music to the film is okay. I think that Michael Giacchino tends to be a little bit derivative in how he does the scores to the films. This one, he basically takes the music that Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard wrote for Batman Begins in the Nolan trilogy, which the theme goes da-da, and here he just inverts it. Instead of da-da, it's da-da. Okay, fine.
All right, so once again, Ben Shapiro is completely inept when it comes to anything music. He plays violin and thinks that means he plays violin mediocre, by the way. Like his form is very, very stiff and rigid and does not sound pleasant, but I digress on that. Every time he talks music, he gets it wrong. The scoring of this film is phenomenal, near Oscar nomination worthy. Not that the Oscars mean anything, but the scoring of this music is insanely intricate and perfect. The way that it paces with the film, the way that the big moments hit into the themes established, it's one of those masterclass of how to do, film scoring correctly. It's not going to be over the top or really complicated pieces because that's not necessary to make amazing film scores. Think about the stuff that like John Williams does. It's usually pretty simple. Dun 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 dun, and then like almost every John Williams score sounds the same, but when it's applied the right way, it's very impactful, very memorable. This film is a much more serious tone. And Shapiro mentions Hans Zimmer. It's a good comparison to some of the darker tones to it, but it doesn't really do justice to what was actually done in the scoring of this film and how it was applied to the set pieces and scenes that it was intended for. The scoring, the music of this complements the visuals so perfectly that as an art piece, it's very, 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 very hard to argue that this is not the best Batman film because, quite frankly, it is from an art perspective. The only one that could come close is The Joker, I would say. The Dark Knight's still what I would consider the best Batman film, but when you're just looking at it as a piece of art, the visuals and the music of this have not really gotten to this kind of a level in a Batman movie. There's not been this much care to them before. So Ben's wrong about music. Again, nobody should be surprised. Ben's always wrong about music. Leave music to the music people, Ben. Of course, you don't know how to leave anything to anyone. You think you're the best at everything.
So it's a little bit derivative, but the score is totally fine. The acting is okay, as we'll find out in a second. They give Robert Pattinson nothing to do as Batman. Nothing to do as Batman. I didn't think that Zoe Kravitz had any sort of chemistry with Robert Pattinson, so she's fine. She's kind of flirty. I didn't see anything particularly wrong with her performance. I just didn't see a lot right with her performance. You have John Turturro showing up as Carmine Falcone, and he's John Turturro, so he's okay. He's somewhat menacing. The best performance in the film is Colin Farrell playing the Penguin. You literally cannot spot Colin Farrell in this makeup. There's no way that you can see Colin Farrell here. The whole movie, I'm staring at him going, that's not Colin. It is Colin Farrell. It's the best performance in the movie. Paul Dano gives a good performance in the film, although he's sort of...
I'm confused. He said that Colin Farrell's performance was the best. I think he's confusing that with the makeup team. It still was very much Colin Farrell. It just didn't look like him. He was playing, a very generic Penguin. If anything, Penguin was one of the most forgettable elements of this movie. He didn't have to be there as a character. It was just they wanted a familiar Batman mob villain. So here's Penguin. The makeup department did a great job, absolutely, but Colin Farrell was just playing the part in the makeup. So I think he kind of missed the mark there. We'll see him. I'm going to wait for him to elaborate on Robert Pattinson's Batman. He said they gave him nothing to do. I feel like they gave his Bruce Wayne very little to do, but we'll wait till his analysis because there's a specific reason that Bruce Wayne didn't have a very wide range in this film. And then Catwoman felt like Catwoman. It was a lot better than Anne Hathaway Catwoman, but we haven't really done Catwoman very well much throughout the Batman lore. This is one of the better versions, but I would agree with him there that you're not going to be like, oh my God, that performance from Catwoman was so amazing. No, nothing like that.
Playing the Joker a little bit, he's playing more wide-eyed, as Paul Dano is apt to do. The main character of the film is the Riddler, and herein lies the main problem with the film. The biggest problem with the film is that the film hates Batman.
The film hates Batman, huh? Well, Batman hates Batman, if you're as much of a comic buff as you claim to be. The film seems to take the understanding of Batman that Batman has of himself. Batman doesn't like what he does. He doesn't like the essence of Batman. He tries to escape being Batman, but doesn't because of duty. He doesn't trust anyone. He doesn't even trust himself. He has contingency plans for everything, including himself in almost every line of Batman comics. He is a broken man, a man who just is bitter and is not liked by very many. So, yeah, the film doesn't hate Batman. Batman is just that kind of a character, but we'll see what he means by the film hates Batman. As far as his take on the Riddler, Riddler's a character in the film that's done very, very well for what they're trying to do. And there's actually moments of the Riddler's performance near the end that were very, very, very chilling because they were clearly making the Riddler out to be someone with a severe mental disturbance, severe mental illness, probably some form of extreme, just general personality disorder and or extreme autism mixed with that. And the way the actor portrays it in one of the critical moments of the film is so alarmingly on point as someone whose education is in psychology and who has a lot of personal experience with it. It was just, ooh. So his acting was definitely a highlight moment when he was able to shine. But let's see why the film hates Batman according to Ben Shapiro.
Like the actual Batman character hates the Batman character. And this drives me up an absolute wall. The biggest problem with the film is not the wokeness. Yes, there's some woke touches. You have Catwoman, who is a woman of color, who is, of course, good. And you have the black female mayor, who's good. And you have the black Jim Gordon, who's good. Every white character is apparently bad, like all of them. Fine, whatever. I don't really care about that. That's fine.
I mean, not every white character is bad, but at least he's saying he doesn't care because that would be a weird thing to care about. The film doesn't really frame it that way, but moving on.
You have Catwoman say stuff about white privileged elites, and she makes a suggestion that Bruce Wayne is a child when his parents were killed. He doesn't really have a right to be super upset about that because, of course, he was very, very rich. That doesn't kind of rings hollow. You know?
I mean, it's not that it rings hollow, and that's not really the point. Because the Riddler makes the same point about Bruce Wayne, like, why should Bruce Wayne be sad? Right? He didn't really, and the Riddler's also white. The Riddler's like, why would Bruce Wayne be sad? He was rich and privileged as an orphan. Who cares? There are levels to how bad your life is. So it's not that it doesn't have merit. It's just they're showing the people in this film as people. And I'll slow Ben back down now because we're getting more into the meat and potatoes of it. He gets to 1.5 speed. Ben has earned 1.5 speed, just so you guys can track with them. But I think there's a point missed here that one of the main tenets of this film was to try to make everyone very much human characters, not comic characters. So when they accuse Batman of something or say he doesn't deserve to be upset, it's not that you're supposed to agree with them. You're just supposed to see that tension that builds that inner turmoil within Batman, because Batman also has that within himself of other people have had it worse than me, but this has defined my life. That's not new for Batman to have as a story arc and a thought.
Now, a lot of these lines seem like throwaways for film lefty Twitter, but the main theme is not a throwaway. The main theme is what matters here. The film despises Batman. So every Batman iteration has to explain why a man who is a billionaire would dress up like a bat and go around beating up criminals. It's not answered. And the director doesn't know. And the writer doesn't know.
What do you mean it's not answered? This is Batman's second year of doing it. He's legitimately trying to figure out why he's doing it. In fact, the entire narrative is him trying to piece through, why am I doing this? And he starts by saying it's for vengeance. And at the end, he says, maybe vengeance isn't what we need. Maybe we need someone who could also be some sort of a hope, a way forward, which is an interesting arc for Batman to take. It's actually one of the more interesting directions of this film, is tackling something that there have been comics that tackled, but not too many films that have tackled, which is the other side of Batman of, if he's just a vigilante who doesn't kill, what's the point? Like, how much change can he really make as just a menacing threat? How powerful can he really be? These are good topics to discuss, and this is Batman in his first 2 years of being Batman, and he's like, what impact can I have as just a vigilante? And Batman as a character has to be more than a vigilante to have an impact. In every arc of Batman where there are larger stakes than beating up the Riddler or the Joker to stop some bank heist, these are questions that have to be addressed in different ways. Christopher Nolan's Batman was more about Batman being able to escape and trying to do what he could to solve corruption and being a symbol for the city, even if that's not the symbol the city needed, right? He had to be more than vengeance. This film is addressing that same issue in a very different way because it's addressing it from a point of view where Bruce Wayne / Batman hasn't figured that out quite yet. And he's trying to figure that out. And it's showing the events that have taken place to possibly push him into whatever direction he ends up going. whether this is the Batman that would end up being the front man of the, one of the front men of the Justice League and that kind of a universe, or just one of the Batmen that tries to save Gotham and ride off into the sunset or train a new ward, But this isn't new. This is just how this character arc goes. He's not a perfect hero. That's one of the reasons he's so popular.
And this is the problem. So in the Nolan films, to take the contrast, the question as to why Batman does this is because if Batman does not actually intimidate the criminal underworld because the city is so corrupt, no one else will do it, and money isn't going to solve the problem. And so he needs to create a theatrical kind of fear in order to dissuade the criminal underworld from participating. And then as it turns out, he also has to save the city itself and demonstrate his faith in the city by becoming a symbol. Here,
that's what the Batman, the Robert Pattinson Batman, thinks he needs to do. He just kind of finds out it doesn't work. Which was one of the nice themes of this film as well. Is like, well, what if that didn't work? What if becoming a vigilante only inspired more vigilantes, which is actually a much more realistic outcome? Because we've seen people do real world, I'm a superhero stuff. In real life, we've seen how that plays out, and it usually just inspires more people to do it and doesn't actually solve anything. So the movie is very grounded in that, no, if a dude did this, what if it didn't work? What then? And that's a very fair question to ask.
You don't really know why Batman is doing what he's doing. It's never explained. He's very wealthy. He doesn't apparently do anything with his wealth. He doesn't try to give charity. He doesn't. And this is actually made a plot point. He's a bad man. He's white. He's a bad white man who doesn't actually give charity. He's not involved, and he's not playing that as a role. Again, this is part of the problem: is that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same character. So I keep using the Nolan comparison because it is the gold standard for all superhero movies, not just Batman movies. So
it's the golden standard for all superhero movies, not just Batman. Well, one of the three. But that's a 3-part trilogy, and only one of them is a gold standard. The other two are pretty good. But that was an odd statement to make as a throwaway. I'd be pretty sure that the Marvel Extended Universe, aside from a few throwaways, are the golden standard for superhero affairs. Not that they're super deep, but they're just much more on the nose of what a superhero film should be. DC hasn't really figured that out fully. The Dark Knight did, but the Christopher Nolan trilogy is not some golden rule of superhero films.
When you look at Nolan's Batman, Bruce Wayne is the character that Batman is playing. Hey, Bruce Wayne is not real. Batman is real. Batman is who Bruce Wayne really is. And so he has to play a fob. In Batman Begins, he's squiring around ladies in his Lamborghini, and he's buying hotels, and he's doing all of this just to cover up for the fact that he is Batman. So you get very separate Batman and Bruce Wayne. You get the same thing actually with Michael Keaton. Batman and Bruce Wayne are two different characters. Here, Batman and Bruce Wayne are the exact same character.
Because he's starting out and figuring it out. You missed that plot point. In fact, Alfred's entire arc is built around trying to develop Bruce as a person who can separate from Batman to Bruce. That's a recurring theme is when Bruce Wayne, he's got the Batman makeup still on and he's, brooding about, Alfred's like, you have to be Bruce Wayne. If you want to have a real impact, you can't just be Batman. You have to be both. So it seems like Ben is extremely triggered by the idea of a character actually developing and learning, which is what this Batman is doing.
There are points where Bruce Wayne is walking around. He's got the same dour expression, same glazed look, same kind of emo thing going on as Batman does the entire movie. And so there's no dichotomy. Alrighty, folks, well, I may not.
There's not supposed to be. That's one of the points of this movie is that because he's just so consumed with this, he's not having an impact. And I would imagine, since they're setting this up as a series, that's going to be developed more, that separation where he becomes an actual Bruce Wayne and an actual Batman to enact change. Because at the end, he was realizing as Batman, he needed to be a symbol of hope. So the logical next step would be he would start to become that symbol of hope and enacting that change as Bruce Wayne. The reason he wasn't doing it as Bruce Wayne is clearly explained through many scenes of dialogue in which he says, Bruce Wayne can't do anything, and he also takes guilt and responsibility for thinking that the Waynes didn't do enough, like his family, and he's instantly convinced that his family is completely corrupt and evil by the smallest amount of evidence, which shows that's what he really intrinsically thought. He feels guilt for all of the privilege that he has when no one else around him has it, and he's dealing with that. It's a complex, realistically built character. And Alfred is his rock who is saying, no, your parents were good people. Good people aren't perfect people, but they're good people. And he's like, your parents were good. You're a good person. Bruce Wayne needs to exist outside of Batman. If you want to make change, you can't just be a vigilante beating up people on the street. This movie is just too mature for someone like Ben Shapiro, is clearly the message I'm getting from him.
I love the Batman, but here's the thing. Real Batman knows how to protect himself and protect his family, and you should too.
All right, this is the ring plug. Let's skip. And the plot. Actually, I think I might be done with this. We'll see. We'll see. I'm going to put him on just 2-speed again, because I don't need the plot synopsis. Let's just see his takes on it.
So here's the actual plot of the film. Batman has only been Batman for a couple of years, so he's not really good at Batmaning yet, and he is tracking down criminals, and he gets drawn into a plot by the Riddler. The Riddler is getting clues so that Batman can track down all the way through the system of Gotham this citywide corruption that apparently is going to bring down the entire superstructure of faith in the city. Meanwhile, you have Catwoman, who's played by Zoe Kravitz, and Zoe Kravitz is similarly engaged in an attempt to commit a robbery against one of these underworld figures, but she's drawn into Batman's orbit by a murder that both of them are investigating at the same time, murder of her roommate, maybe something more going on there. The Riddler is the main villain of the movie. You see the Penguin a fair bit. Carmine Falcone is one of the big characters in the movie. You get a little bit of Alfred, of course you get Jim Gordon, whose main job in this film is apparently just to say Jesus over and over again.
Christ is Coulson.
Whenever something bad happens, he just goes, Jesus. And that happens like 6 times. Like Jim Gordon does nothing except for basically stop Batman from getting arrested a lot. That's pretty much.
Why do you care about Jim Gordon saying Jesus? And that is not all Jim Gordon does. Jim Gordon, this film went so far over this man's head. Jim Gordon's point in this character arc is to show, like, one of the only ways that Batman has any access to do detective work. He, for some reason, believes in the idea of Batman. And against all else, against all of the people telling him he's wrong, Jim Gordon is the one that says, no, this guy is good for us. So he's the one behind the bat signal. He's the one trying to help. And so Jim Gordon's arc is very much as kind of like the Alfred for Batman, whereas Alfred is the Alfred for Bruce Wayne. So when you're talking about a young, naive, growing character, the movie is showing you the people who are kind of fostering their development, helping them, being those guiding moments for someone like Batman. So again, just over Shapiro's head.
That's all he does. He's a bad detective. He doesn't do anything. The plot is that all these people get killed. Batman uncovers it. He realizes that his dad was corrupt also, or that his dad engaged in corruption with Carmine Falcone. Finally, we get to the end. Paul Dano does it's such a ripoff of Seven. He gives himself up. He doesn't get captured by Batman. Batman does not prevent a single one of these deaths. Batman, in fact, is complicit in one of the deaths by accident. And he doesn't actually capture the Riddler because he's clever. The Riddler gives himself up by sitting in a diner and getting arrested. Then he unleashes a bombing of Gotham that essentially causes the flooding of the city. And Batman goes to the Madison Square Garden, where a mayoral event is now being held for the brand new mayor, who is an uplifting black female who has no other story or backstory, so she's really uninteresting. It starts to flood. And up on top, in the wings, are a bunch of Paul Dano's followers, are a bunch of the Riddler's followers who are all dressed like the Riddler, and they're shooting down into the crowd to try and kill members of the elite in Gotham City. And so Batman goes up there and he's beating people up. There comes a point where he's beating this guy, and he's really, like, maybe beating him almost to death. And he stops, and they take off that guy's mask, and they say, who are you? And the guy says, I am vengeance. Okay, now this is the theme throughout the film, move the theme. Okay, so in order to explain why this is a problem, you have to now understand the character of the Riddler. So it says right at the beginning of the movie, who is Batman? I'm vengeance, right? He's just on the streets and he's beating people up.
I'm vengeance.
And then people keep calling him Mr. Vengeance for no apparent reason. Like, we don't know why they're calling him that, because he never actually publicly says he's vengeance. It's in his creepy diary, which again is supposed to be a mirror image of the fact that the Riddler also keeps a Zodiac Killer style diary. So they're supposed to be two halves of the same whole. Batman is beating up this follower of the Riddler's. He takes off his mask and the guy says, I'm vengeance. And suddenly Batman sees. Suddenly Batman realizes he can't be vengeance. That's not what he's meant to do. He's betrayed his mission. And so he then descends on an electrified cable because he's trying to stop people from being electrocuted by this flying electrical wire. And he cuts off the cable. He's holding onto it. He falls down into the water. A rebaptism. He gets up and then he proceeds to lead a bunch of people who are not really trapped, but kind of trapped, I suppose. And he leads them to, I guess, a safer place by carrying a torch. And then he goes up to the top of Madison Square Garden and he is helping people be airlifted and evac'd out, medevac'd out. And this is how he has learned fulfillment.
Okay, so not much to say there. That's a very odd version of a plot summary, but it's there. Trying to think. I'm going to wait to see what he says about these things, because he seemed to take issue with how the Riddler got caught, which means he doesn't understand the character of the Riddler or the character of Batman. But let's see his takes on it, because that was mostly just a synopsis with some snarky remarks.
So what is this movie about? This movie is about how fighting criminality does not actually help innocent people. He says this at the very beginning. He says, I'm not sure I'm doing any good. Not sure I'm doing any good by fighting the criminals. Crime is still up. It turns out that Batman has to stop being Batman. Batman has been missing it the whole time. What Batman really has to be is Superman. Batman needs to go into areas like Madison Square Garden and not fight the criminals. He needs to go and lead people with a torch to a slightly safer area. He needs to help medevac people on the top of it. He needs to build Habitat for Humanity. He needs to join Jimmy Carter and build houses for homeless people. That's what Batman needs to be doing.
That's not the point, because when at the end of the film, you know, after all of this happens, you see him with, like, oh God. Ben, if you've seen the film, you already know how off base this is. This is Batman, again, I said this earlier, realizing that just vengeance alone is not going to cut it. He has to be something more than just a vigilante that beats people up. That doesn't mean he's not going to be a vigilante that beats people up. I'm pretty sure it'd be pretty hard to make Batman 2 and 3 if he just stops being Batman and all he does is, run the Red Cross. That's not the point the film was trying to make. It showed Batman in the light, which was very interesting to see and very rare to see Batman not in the heat of darkness, because he's like, I have to be more. Because the point was a lot bigger of a point than what Ben's putting here. The point is that when you are fighting for good, there is a fine line between becoming the evil you're fighting and still being good. That's why it showed the Riddler. All he was really doing differently than Batman was killing. He was taking it that next step. He was just killing. But he was motivating the same people. And in fact, Batman was motivating the Riddler. And we'll see if Ben talks about this or really even understands it. But the entire purpose was that the Riddler was inspired by, moved by, and thinking that Batman was willingly helping him. The Riddler wasn't trying to toy with Batman. He wasn't trying to leave clues for Batman to discover or play a mind game with him. He literally thought that Batman was the only one smart enough with the muscle on the inside to help him fulfill his plan, and he thought Batman was in on it. And so the film plays with the idea of being the hero is not too far removed from being the villain. And so Batman's like, how do I do that separation? Just by not killing, well, everyone else will just kill with the same mindset that I inspire. So if it's just a rule for me, it doesn't matter. How can I be more? How can I not just be some dude that beats people up and makes you scared of me? I need to inspire more out of people. How do I do that? And if you're going to try to tell me that that's not something Batman has done before, I'm going to tell you, you don't know Batman. There are plenty iterations of Batman where he is out and about as Batman, in the light, during the day, doing the charity rally stuff to motivate the troops, and then at night, doing the Batman stuff. There are tons of versions of Batman like that throughout Batman's lore. Some versions don't ever do that, some do. But why would you take issue with this one being developed as becoming one of those types of Batmans, which honestly makes more realistic sense than the one that only is a vigilante? Because at that point, why not just be the Punisher and finish the job and do the kills?
This really is a sort of attack on the idea that fighting crime helps innocent people. It's an almost defund the police attitude toward.
It's not. The police are seen as heroes. When the corrupt police get, taken out, it shows all of the good police rallying. This is not a defund the police mindset. This film treats crime as bad and not crime as good. This film doesn't even toy with the idea that the police at whole are bad. They talk about police corruption, pretty normal in Batman. But honestly, in this Batman, there's actually far more good guy cops than in most Batman iterations I've seen. Like, the police force in Gotham in this Batman is actually probably one of the cleanest police forces I've ever seen, because they had a lot of people who were willing to clean up the police force, which usually it's a lot harder than that in Batman lore.
Toward what crime is. And it's an attack on the basic idea that individuals are capable of doing justice by finding bad guys and fighting them.
I mean, are individuals really capable of enacting justice by finding bad guys and beating them? Usually not. I don't know if you've seen how that works out in real life, but it usually doesn't. So I don't know why you're taking issues with that.
Instead, apparently, individuals are only capable of doing nice things by helping little old ladies cross the street. It's this sort of mentality that has led to New York turning into Gotham City in the last couple of years, by the way. That's a fundamental...
Wait. So, do you really think New York City had a bunch of people just beating up criminals? That's why crime wasn't... Do you really live in a world where you think crime has risen in New York because people stopped beating up criminals? Crime's gone up because of terrible governance, things that you would dislike, Mr. Shapiro, liberal policies that have led to less money. Less money usually leads to more desperation, which leads to more crime. But it's not because people aren't, dressing up at night and going vigilante. I don't think that's something that's been happening in New York. And it's not because the police have just stopped policing. Are you high?
Betrayal of what Batman is. What makes Batman different from the Riddler and than any of these other criminals is these criminals target innocent people, and Batman targets criminals. That's the...
No. Have you watched Batman? You know how often... You said that Christopher Nolan's Batman is the staple. Every villain in Christopher Nolan's Batman targeted bad people. Every villain, specifically in their agenda, was to target bad people and then sometimes be okay with innocents caught in the crossfire. Especially the Joker. He almost only targeted villains except for his boat experiment, in which he offered killing villains instead of killing innocents. The bank he robbed from to open the film was a mob bank, and he knew that. So are you going to sit here and tell me that because the Riddler targets bad people, he is now somehow some SJW version of a villain to try to make Batman and the Riddler both the bad guys? Are you trying... How can you sit there and tell me that Christopher Nolan is the gold standard of Batman, but what makes the Riddler a bad villain in this bad Batman is he goes after criminals instead of innocent people? Ben, you're dumb.
The basis of the character. The entire basis of the character is the cops are bad at targeting criminals because they're corrupt. Batman is good at targeting criminals because he's smart and because he's rich and because he's incorruptible. That's the entire basis of Batman.
No. The entire basis of Batman is that he's the world's greatest detective from, DC Comics, Detective Comics. Batman was the best detective. The entire basis of Batman is he's the world's greatest detective. Everything else is subject to change. But the only basis for Batman that's supposed to be consistent is, well, I guess his parents were killed, he dresses like a bat, and he's the greatest detective. In fact, the reason Batman was so effective in early comics wasn't because he was good at beating people up, it's he was good at solving crime so that the police could find and arrest the bad guys. Beating people up was secondary in most of Batman's early iterations. He just usually would have to beat up bad guys when he would get tricked or captured, or beat them up and leave them for the police to pick up. But being like some vigilante that found drug dealers all the time and beat them up to save the city, that's a more modern Batman concept. But Batman from an origin is, hey, I'm a good detective. I'm going to find the worst criminals and help the police get them. That's the basis of Batman, Ben.
And they take all that and they flip it on its head because they don't like Batman. And this is why I have real problems with the movie.
No, Ben, you don't like Batman because you clearly don't understand Batman.
I kind of hate the movie. Like, the more I think about it, the more I get angry at it. Because they take the fundamental idea of what Batman is supposed to be, the protector of the innocent who targets the criminal, and they say that if he targets the criminal, this makes him no different than criminals.
No, that's not a point made in the film at all. Targeting the criminal is not why that's nothing to do with it. Batman never thought that, oh my gosh, I'm the same as the Riddler because I target bad people. Batman realized I'm no different than the Riddler because I haven't made myself good enough. All I've done is beat people up. I've done everything the Riddler does except for kill. I haven't shown any sort of solution. All I've shown is brute force and being better at brute force than everyone else. Yeah, that does make you pretty much no different, especially since the Riddler was interested in the same thing you were, taking out corrupt people. And often the Riddler has been very interesting in his motives. And like I said earlier, most Batman villains have had pretty reasonable motives aside from the mobsters, because most Batman villains are trying to take down the mob or take over the mob. Batman has a long history of Batman and the villains being very similar, but Batman having a few things that separates him. This movie challenges those things that Batman thought separated him from the Riddler and said, well, do they really? And when you look at it, no, they don't. So Batman has to think of how to be even better than that.
Because Paul Dano, who's the Riddler, is also targeting criminals, all the way up until the very end, when they have to just sort of add on this attack on Madison Square Garden and New York Broad Writ for no reason. He has no motivation for blowing up a bunch of trucks and flooding downtown, like none.
He has every motivation for that. He says it in all of his live streams. It's a reset. It's to make everyone have a fair shake. And what he needed to do was show the corruption so that the city knew about it, and then have his followers take out everyone left. And the reason for setting this up this way is to try to get the general population to be on their side. Because, you know, Ben, I know something you don't have very much experience with is how to actually get people to agree with you. All you like to do is cause argument rather than cause agreement. So what the Riddler was doing in his own crazy head was, if I could get people passionate about this and following me, then by the time we show everyone all of the corruption in Gotham, then they will cheer for us when we go and take out the rest of them after the city gets flooded. They will applaud us for the reset because we've shown them how evil these people are. They will know we are the heroes. And the other thing that the Riddler really wanted was attention. He wanted to be the beacon of light. The way he saw it, after all this went down and he gets put into Arkham, Batman and him will be hailed as the heroes of Gotham, and eventually Batman will be able to come down to, Arkham Asylum with the new version of Gotham PD and release the Riddler and give him a Medal of Honor and the keys to the city. That's what's going on in the Riddler's head. That's how he sees this going down. That's why when Batman confronts him and says, "I'm not on your side," he has a complete emotional and mental breakdown because he was so far off from the emotional perspective of what was going on, even though mentally he was ahead of everybody in how to execute his plans, including Ben Shapiro, who has no idea what his plans were, obviously.
Doesn't explain why he does it. He doesn't explain what the purpose of it is. All the way along, he's been saying, "I'm exposing the true face of Gotham." Okay, that's a rationale. But what does that have to do with blowing up the city? They add that on just so that they can create a false distinction between Batman and the Riddler.
No, you just missed the bigger picture, which is something that the Riddler would take great delight in, the fact that you missed the bigger picture. He can't do the takeover and the reset of the city with those people still alive. Plus, he needed Batman's help, again, to get them exposed so he could take them out. Because if you take the head off of the beast, you can then take over the beast. But if he just blows up and floods the city with those people still in power, nothing changes. But if he does it after he's taken out of those people and then does another great spectacle to take out whoever's left, you can enact change.
So that Batman can change his mission. So now Batman's mission is not beating up bad guys and stopping bad guys. Now Batman's mission is to be a firefighter. He's no longer a detective or a police officer. He's a firefighter. That's a betrayal. And it's a real problem. And that's my biggest issue with the film.
That's not a betrayal. And again, Batman's done that a lot throughout Batman lore. Like a lot. Doesn't he even do that in the Dark Knight series? He does. He helps little kids out of fires and stuff. He definitely plays firefighters. Like, multiple times to kids and adults. In fact, they made a big deal out of it in Batman Begins when he doesn't save Ra's al Ghul, because usually he saves everyone, and he decided not to save him. I don't think you understand Batman, Ben.
It just feels like such a sellout. It feels like such a sellout of what Batman is supposed to be. Again, it's got a little bit of woke politics, but that's really not the problem. The problem
what you think Batman's supposed to be, because you don't understand the character,
is the broader woke orientation of the film. If the Nolan Batman was about the idea that you help innocent people by fighting criminality and provide an inspiration to people to fight criminality, if that's the idea of Batman, which it is,
that's Nolan's trilogy main arc, sort of. But I think Nolan's trilogy also had a lot to do with the idea of forcing people to be better themselves. One of the arcs of Nolan's film, or one of the main story elements of it, was nothing was going to be fixed in Gotham unless people were shown their own goodness, right? They were shown that they already had this potentiality to be good people. It just needed to be exploited. So, in effect, Christopher Nolan's Batman was actually a lot more firefighter pep rally in motive than Robert Pattinson's, because Christopher Nolan's Batman, his main goal through most of what he did and handled things was to try to get people to self-actualize their own good qualities. And you have that interaction with the Joker and Batman in Christopher Nolan series, where the Joker points out that Batman and the Joker are the same. And Batman doesn't have a good argument for why they're not the same. You also have this in the opening scene of The Dark Knight when the vigilante copycat Batmans, they go, what's the difference between you and me? And the only answer Batman has for them is, I'm not wearing hockey pants. In other words, Christopher Nolan's Batman never was able to answer the question that Robert Pattinson's Batman's trying to answer of what gives me the right to do this? What change am I making? And his solution, Christopher Nolan's Batman solution, was two parts. One of those parts was running away at the end and just giving up being Batman, which I would think Ben would think is the ultimate betrayal of Batman based on what he's saying, because his end goal, the Christopher Nolan's troubled Batman's end goal was to stop being Batman. And what he did before he stopped being Batman was just try to show people the good within themselves so that they could take care of themselves without Batman. How you're saying that is okay, but Robert Pattinson's Batman, who's figuring things out, is somehow like some washed out, ungood version of Batman, is mental gymnastics that I cannot begin to comprehend the layers of stupidity it takes to get there.
Completely thrown on his head here. Matt Reeves, who's credited as both a director and a writer on the film, he does not like Batman, and I can't get over this. How do you give $150 million to a dude to make a movie about Batman when he clearly does not like Batman? When he thinks that Batman is bad, and that Batman has to be shown the error of his ways and learn to be a nicer human being. By the way,
how many times has Batman been shown the error of his ways? In your beloved Christopher Nolan trilogy, no less. Every single chapter of that movie was Batman being shown the error of his ways. Like, that was like the whole movie.
End of the movie, Catwoman, who at no point has actually demonstrated any sort of moral bona fides. Like, I'm not sure she does a moral thing in the entire movie. At the very end, she says to him, why don't you run away with me? And we'll go rob some hedge fund CEOs. And he doesn't say back to her, you know, that's bad to rob hedge fund CEOs. Instead, he thinks about it for a moment. She's like, no, you belong in Gotham. The generalized cheap left-wing sensibility is very silly with regard to Catwoman.
There's that last scene where Batman, acting like he's going to stay Batman, right, with Catwoman. But I don't think he really cared about the hedge fund thing. He was really contemplating, the relationship thing. Not specifically the hedge fund robbing. So, also, why are you judging Selena Kyle's moral compass? Selena Kyle's always been an anti-hero who would absolutely take the Robin Hood approach of take from the rich and give to the poor. That's Selena Kyle's thing. And Batman oftentimes struggles with whether or not Selena Kyle might be right. So again, Ben, do you like Batman? Do you know Batman? I don't think you do.
If I have not made clear at this point, the movie's also 8 hours long. It's like a Wagnerian ring cycle.
It's 3. This is a good thumbnail moment just to get this out of the way. Finally. Well, if I ever needed more evidence that Ben Shapiro is not too bright and talks out of his depth, here it is. Well, let's get this moron parade finished.
This film, it just goes on and on and on. Every shot is composed in order to have people walk across rooms. Like Christopher Nolan would snap that cut right to the action. If you watch
again with Christopher Nolan, bro, I feel like if you watch Christopher Nolan with a big boy brain, if you didn't like the Batman, you'd hate that trilogy if you actually understood it. My God.
Dark Knight, there is no wasted motion in that film, and it's 2.5 hours long. This is 3 hours long, and it feels like 4. I never check my watch during movies, particularly not a Batman movie, and I check my watch at least twice during this film. It's better than Marvel, because everything's better than Marvel, because Marvel doesn't take characters seriously, and Marvel feels like cotton candy. This doesn't feel like cotton candy, it just feels like...
Yeah. Tell that to about half of Marvel's catalog, which finds a way to beautifully balance, popcorn cinema with hard-hitting themes. It's funny when, you're trying to, I don't know what you're trying to get at there, that you have to be super serious to be a good movie. I disagree. The original Star Wars trilogy has a lot of great things, and it takes itself seriously only when it's supposed to. And that's what most Marvel movies do. Does Marvel have a lot of stinkers? Absolutely. But to act like all of Marvel is like that, no, that's just because you get triggered because you're a small man.
It's like a fundamental betrayal of the character, which is just, it's lazy writing. And more than that, it's not nice to the audience. The audience wants to see Batman be Batman and be good.
Here's the thing about the audience. This is like one of the most beloved films of Batman from the audience of all time in reviews and money. So clearly, the audience, the people that actually like Batman, enjoyed this. You? Well, you're just an idiot.
Good at being Batman and know why he's being Batman. They don't want to see Batman learn the lesson that being Batman is bad.
But Batman learned that lesson in your beloved Christopher Nolan trilogy. In the first one, in Batman Begins, he does everything wrong, has to figure it out. he... Ben. Just because you talk fast doesn't mean you're smart.
That defeats the purpose of going to a Batman film. Alrighty, so that is my review of the...
All right, we made it. We somehow survived. Let's see some of these fresh comments. Yeah, nothing too delicious. Oh, this is a good one. Someone says, Pattinson says if the Batman flops, he's doing porn. And suddenly Ben says it's bad. Coincidence? Don't think so. Good take. Okay, so, wow. I mean, we knew that was going to be bad. We knew that it was going to take me a long time to get through it, but this was worse than I could have imagined, and it took longer than I could have imagined. So this will be your one upload of the day now. You can thank Ben Shapiro for that. Comment below, subscribe if you enjoyed this absolute teardown of an absolutely terrible review, and then we'll have more videos coming to you soon. More of the requests that you guys have put on the website and stuff are coming up as well, so thanks for putting those in. I've got them in the queue, and until we explore again, I'll see you next time.